Welcome to the Airbnb Roadmap, the podcast designed to navigate you through the entire journey of short-term rental success. Whether you're just starting out or ready to take your hosting game to the next level. My husband and I became super hosts within just months of launching our first Airbnb and have proudly kept that title ever since. With over 350 reviews and an overall 4.95 star ratings, we picked up a hack or two I'm excited to share with you. In each episode, I break down the strategies, insights, and industry secrets that set profitable short-term rentals apart. From choosing the right property, understanding local regulations, and obtaining your listing to go beyond just the basics. I'm here to share everything you need to succeed. So if you're ready to map out your path to Airbnb success and unlock the full potential of short-term rentals, join me on the Airbnb Roadmap. Your journey starts here. Hey, I'm Brittany Wenninger, and I hope that you are having a fantastic day so far, because today's episode of the Airbnb Roadmap is going to be one of those episodes that you probably need to listen to a couple of times, because it's all about the rules and regulations of short-term rentals. And I will admit, this is something that gets so many people hung up on, and unfortunately, a lot of first-time investors don't really make it past this point because they get so overwhelmed and discouraged. But hopefully this won't be you, because you have me by your side helping you through it, and we'll just go through all things rules and regulations. I feel like that I have been tiptoeing on this topic for so long in all the other episodes, but now we get to finally take a deep dive into this topic, and just all I'm going to say is hang in there with me, because there is a lot going on. And there's just rules and regulations. It's a beast. It is a freaking beast. And if you conquer the beast, like the last level of Mario World, where like you got to conquer that big old monster dude that's a turtle. Like once you conquer that guy, like you are just flying high. You're good, right? So let's just get into it, shall we? So when we talk about rules and regulations, think of it as a pyramid, and the pyramid has sections. So the very bottom layer, the foundation of the rules and regulations, that's going to be your state. Now the one above that is the county, and then above that one is the township, and then the HOA. So let's just start with the very bottom section of your pyramid, the foundation, because all of the other rules and regulations fall on top of that one, meaning that their rules and regulations stack on top of the state. So whatever state you live in or you want to invest in, just call the county and see what the state rules and regulations are. I'm located in Wisconsin, so all of these examples are going to be from the state of Wisconsin. So for the state of Wisco, I like to just switch it up on you. You like that? So for the state of Wisco, we have pretty much like a health department. Hopefully your state has a health department as well. But what it is you have to apply for a roaming tourist license. This is literally just someone going to the Airbnb once it's completely done. Remember, your Airbnb has to be completely done. And this person's going to go in there and they're going to inspect the cabin, the property, whatever you may have. And some of the things that they look for is actually pretty ridiculous. But overall, the inspection is very simple. I remember the very first inspection we had, the girl didn't even walk around the cabin. She's like, "Oh, this place is so cute. Like, you're going to do such an amazing job." And I was like, "Okay, cool. Thank you. Does that mean I passed?" And she just did not take her job seriously, which I mean, I'm okay with. So thanks, ma'am. But I did get a flyer prior, and some of the really funky things that they look for are non-slip mats in your shower. So if you have a shower tub, if it's a soaking tub, you don't need it, but anywhere that people are standing up in water, you want to make sure that you have a non-slip mat. And again, this is just for the state of Wisconsin. So your state might not even have this. Also, in this flyer, I thought that this was so goofy, but they had a certain way that they wanted the beds made. And I showed this to the cleaner because we made sure that the cabin was deep cleaned before the inspector even got there, because I didn't want her to like turn us down because a spider web or anything like that, which they wouldn't, but I didn't know at this time. For the way that they wanted to make the bed, literally had to have like 1 foot of overlay on the sheet. So like the sheet had to be on the bed and then kind of like folded over, 1 foot of folded sheet on top of the bed. And I was like, this is so ridiculous. But we went with it and everything passed. Now on the flyer, there was some other things. Now another thing on the flyer that I just want to quickly mention is ice. So if you have a refrigerator that is an ice maker, perfect, you do you. If you have a refrigerator that does not make ice, you cannot have ice trays, and you also can't have a bag of ice in the freezer. The reason for this is because people could lace the water in the ice tray. People use that ice and now they're drugged. Another thing too is like I had really cute coffee syrups in one of our properties, and I wanted to do like a whole cute coffee bar and whatnot. Well, my cleaner actually caught this before the inspector got there, but she's like, hey, you can't have this because someone could lace the coffee syrup and now you're just like drugging all your guests. So that's a huge part of short-term rentals, and especially with the inspection, is to make sure that you don't have anything that is already open that people could just pretty much like lace or drug. So obtaining the roaming tourist license, I will admit, is the easiest little section in the pyramid, unfortunately. And just trust me, it is very easy. Just remember, like, my biggest tip for this section is to call the county and see if they have a flyer or any, advice that they can give you of what the inspector is actually looking for. And the inspectors do, like, once you set this meeting up, you can ask the inspector prior to and see if they have any flyers or any information that you could use to just kind of prep their arrival for the short-term rental. That is the biggest thing, is that you can actually talk to these inspectors and make sure that your property is going to pass. They're mainly just looking to make sure that, guests are not checking into a shit show, that everything is all safe and sound, and the property is actually good for a guest, which I hope that if you are listening to this podcast, you are someone that actually cares about your properties. So hopefully you don't have to worry about this. Now, moving on to the county. So the county does have more additional rules and regulations for short-term rentals, and they are pretty straightforward. Some counties in Wisconsin literally have like no rules and regulations. They just say like, hey, just get the roaming tourist license and you're good to go. Other counties, however, are not so easy. So the biggest one that you will come across, and again, I don't know if your state's going to be different, but in Wisconsin, it's the Conditional Use Permit. Now, this permit may seem like it's not that big of a deal, but it is a beast. And what you have to do for this conditional use permit, again, every single county is different, but the one that I have came across is pretty much you apply for your property to be a short-term rental, and you apply with the county and also the township. Once the application gets received by both parties, then the township will actually send all of your neighbors a letter, say, hey, this property at blah, blah, blah address, 123 Banana, I don't know. They want to receive a roaming tourist license. If you have any objection, please go to the hearing at this date and this time. This letter, I will admit, is very scary, because if you have any neighbors that just do not want your property to have a roaming tourist license, aka you want your property to be an Airbnb, they can show up to this hearing and start making objections for you. So you want to make sure that when you go to your hearing, you do have to do this in person. And I would not have someone go to this hearing for you. Like, you need to be doing it yourself. I would have some objections already in your mind of like, hey, how am I going to resolve this issue? Now, when we went through this process, we did our hearing, and it was a shit show. I laugh about it now, but in the moment, like, my husband is not really good at objection handling. He's getting a lot better, but like, he was shaking the whole time. I'll admit my heart was racing as well, because long and behold, a couple of our neighbors did send a letter, and these letters were so ridiculous. So, quick little side note, one of the letters was literally, I don't want these people to have a short-term rental because there's garbage all over the street. There's a refrigerator on the street. There's gutters on the street, and there's already a mess because of it. We also don't want them going into our farmland and messing up the crops. Well, Mr. Neighbor, we haven't even launched the short-term rental yet. So none of that garbage is ours. And also, their crops were across the street from our property, kind of like adjacent from it. And there's just no way that people would go in there because it's far away. Like, we have almost a 2-acre lot. So people aren't going into your crops. So that was kind of funny. And they just totally dismissed that because they're like, you guys aren't even launched yet. And I was like, yeah, that's not even our stuff. And the garbage that they're talking about was like a quarter of a mile down the road. Like, not even us, buddy. The other letter was just like literally 2 words. And it was like, I don't want these people to have a short-term rental. I don't want them going into my property. Well, with this neighbor, he is behind us. And I totally get, like, you don't want people just going into your property whatsoever, like in your land. I totally understand. But how his lot is set up is that he has literally a fence of trees. So it's almost like damn near impossible to even get on his land. And everyone knows him, and they were just like, oh yeah, like, that's just him being him. We'll just dismiss this. But the scary thing was that we didn't know that these neighbors sent a letter in, and we were so thrown off. Like, right when we got in, they showed us these letters, and I was shaking so much because I was like trying to read this stuff, trying to come up with like a solution and what I'm going to say to these people. And it was just like already started off negative. Now, is that going to be you? Hopefully not. But I do want to kind of like prep you that this could happen. Now, my one friend did the exact same hearing in the exact same township. And she said that it was a piece of cake for them. Like, no one had any objections on the board. No neighbors sent in a letter. Like, it was the easiest thing. And I was like, oh, I'm jealous. That was not our case. But I will admit, I do appreciate that property way more because we fought for that one when it came to like the lending first off and then the whole hearing thing. I was like, all right, like, the whole world is saying that we should not have this property, but we made it happen and it's the best one yet. Like, that's by far our favorite property, mainly because our best friends live like right next door and boat slip and all the good jazz. But anyways, so just kind of know that you have a hearing. Now, once all the board members approves a hearing, and they're most likely going to approve most of them just because they do get money from all the bookings that you get. So if they reject it, that means that their township doesn't get as much money. So that's why they're probably going to accept it, just because that township wants your money. Now, once the first hearing is done, you actually have to go to a second hearing with the township. And again, this is just for this county, so other counties might be different. But the second hearing for the township was very easy. That one was just like the township board meeting. And literally they were just like, does anyone object? No one stood up, and it was a piece of cake. So once those 2 hearings were completely done, everyone approved, then the township actually sends the county the approval letter. The county will then reach out to you, set a hearing for the county, and this one's a much larger one. I believe ours was like, I would say 30 or 35 people were in it, whereas the township was literally like us. But The county one was also super easy peasy. We literally just like went there. They said, hey, does anyone object? No one stood up. Now, the funny one, though, is when we did do the county one, there was another short-term rental guy, and he was trying to get his approval as well. Well, this is a one thing that you should never do with short-term rentals, and that's actually operate your short-term rental without a license. And that's exactly what he did. And so not only was he operating without his license, and now he's trying to get his license, he also was shooting his guns on his property. And the neighbor saw that. Obviously, the neighbor didn't know that this was actually the owner. And she actually showed up to the county hearing and was like, hey, like, I'm very terrified. Yes, we're out in the country. This guy was shooting his guns, and I didn't know if it was a guest. I didn't know if it was the owner. Like, I don't want this house to be a short-term rental because I'm terrified. And honestly, I don't blame her. Like, I would be the same way. If I saw one of the neighbors having a gun, shooting it in the yard, and I didn't actually know who that person was, I would not feel safe. Now, like, I'm totally for like shooting guns in the country land, like totally for that. But if I don't know who you are and I see you shooting, yeah, I would be like, hey, let's knock this off. But this guy was like shaking in his boots. Clay and I, we felt for him. We were like, oh, this guy, he just wants his short-term rental. He obviously like effed up badly a couple times. One, operating without a license, and two, shooting his guns off on the property. Like, he's not acting like that this is a investment property whatsoever. And they actually passed him, and they said that he has 3 strikes and he already used one. So I was kind of shocked that they actually passed him, because I don't even know if I would pass this guy, but they passed him, and I was like, oh, made us look like little angels over here. But once the county approved, then we officially were able to launch our short-term rental. So that is one of the rules and regulations for the county, and that's the conditional use permit. One other thing, and I apologize for jumping back, is there's a lot of paperwork with this one too. You have to have a layout of the property. So like if there was a fire or anything like that, like the fire department knows exactly where all the doors are, where the rooms are, and all that good jazz. Also, we had to send in like the septic report, the well water, making sure that like that's all like bacteria free and all that stuff. So that's just kind of like little knick-knack stuff, but it's also part of the conditional use permit. All right, one more item underneath the county that I see a lot, and that is having a resident agent. A resident agent for a short-term rental is a person or entity designated to act as a point of contact for legal or operational matters related to the rental property. This role is very important if the property owner does not actually live locally and the local laws require an on-site or nearby representative for compliance purposes. So in hindsight, what that means is you need to have someone that lives nearby. That is a point of contact that if there's a fire at the cabin, they call this person. This person can actually be on site and represent you. Now, some of the resident agents need to be either like 25 miles away from the property or 25 minutes away from the property. Every single county is completely different with this. When we first started our short-term rental search, we got so hung up on this rule and regulation because the areas that we were looking at, we didn't know anyone that lived in that area. And that was just one of those silly things that I think Clay and I were just like, oh, we don't know anyone in this area. We can't invest in this place. And we just realized that we can literally just ask our cleaner to be the resident agent. Now, if they want the business, they will say yes to you. So that's what we do for this rule and regulation, kind of getting over this hump, is we just find the cleaner. We say, hey, can we put your name and number down as a resident agent? And they always say yes. So don't let this rule and regulation scare you away from a certain area, because you can totally get past that. Thinking of listing your property on Airbnb? Here's an exciting opportunity just for you. When you sign up and use my name, Brittany Wenninger, you'll receive exclusive guidance on your profile. I'll work with you personally to make your listing shine, highlighting what makes your property special, appealing to the guests, and ensuring it stands out from the rest. Plus, you'll receive $48 when you launch and host your first guest in 180 days from signing up with the link in my show notes. It's a unique chance to get an insider perspective and boost your listing's appeal from day one. Don't just list your property. Let's make it unforgettable. Again, sign up by clicking the link in the show notes and let's elevate your Airbnb game together. All right, how are you doing? We are only halfway done, and I told you this episode, it's a doozy. Like, it's a beast, and there's a lot of information I'm throwing at you, but just kind of take a deep breath. Know that so many of us investors, we all do this. And one little quick tip before we get into the township rules and regulations is that if there's a place that has no rules and regulations, it will be very easy. But that means that market might get saturated really fast. Also, if there's an area that has rules and regulations that are a little scarier than most of the rules and regulations, that also kind of scares people away. And that means that not that many people will invest in that area anymore because they're too afraid of those rules and regs. And that just means that your competition is less and less. So there are quite a bit of rules and regulations that townships will put on their township. Now, it all depends on who the township is, right? So we have some townships that are just bullies when it comes to having a short-term rental in their township. Others are like, yeah, come on in, give us your money. And some of these townships that are the bullies, I'll just go through some of their rules and regulations first. And then just know that this is not a normal rule and regulation for towns. Like, these people are just bullies. Okay, so we have that you need to own the property for at least 2 years before making it into a rental. There is an area near me that has awesome cabins. And whenever I just see that the township or municipality is that township, I just like always my stomach sinks because I'm like, oh, here we go again. Like, we can't even get one. Now, we could, but I don't want to wait 2 years to make this property into an investment. Like, we could rent it out long term for 2 years, but honestly, that's just not my thing. And you guys know this by now. So I just stay away from that township. Another one that is a very big bully is you have to, 1, own it for 2 years. 2, you cannot be within 1,000 feet of another short-term rental. And then you also, for this one, is a 7-night minimum. So quickly talking about the night minimums is that a lot of the townships will actually have a night minimum. It all depends on what your strategy is for investing. If, 5-night minimum makes sense for you, 7-night minimum, 3-night minimum. I personally really like just the 1-night minimums because there's so many times that people are driving through the township, they just need a place to stay, so then they rent your cabin. And also, 3 nights is no big deal, but 5 nights I think is a big deal. Like, I usually don't stay in one place for 5 nights when I'm traveling. So when it comes to the township, that's where you're going to see if there's a nightly minimum. And when you call the town to see what their rules and regulations are for Airbnb, again, you can say short-term rentals, but I feel like most of the time people are like, what's a short-term rental? And then you're like, oh, it's an Airbnb. And they're like, oh, yeah. When you call and ask them, just ask, hey, is there a nightly minimum? Always ask that question because sometimes there are, and they just totally forget that they have that in their rules and regulations. So just kind of remember that one. So this township has, I think it's like a 5 or 7 night minimum. You have to be outside of 1,000 foot range from another Airbnb or hotel. And then also you have to own the property for 2 years. So let's just say that township is a no-go in my eyes. Now, another rule and regulation is that you have to, and this is again, like just for townships in my area that I know about, that you have to own at least 3 short-term rentals in order to self-manage them. So if you just buy one, you have to use the township's property manager. And those property managers are not cheap whatsoever. So you have to calculate, all right, does this property still make sense if I'm giving up 20% of the revenue to just have this stay afloat? Most of the time, if you are a savvy investor, the answer is going to be no, because you know exactly how to manage the properties and you want to keep that 20% to yourself. So I always just kind of stay away from those townships. And what I actually do is I look at the small townships outside of the popular ones. And those, most of the time, don't have any rules and regulations. Now, I did say most of the time, meaning that some of the townships they just don't like short-term rentals. And even though that they are small, you still want to make sure that you are calling the township to see what their rules and regulations are, because they still might have some pretty strict rules and regulations, which is not cool, but it's part of the game. It scares people away. So for example, there is a township right outside of a big tourist area in Wisconsin. And you would think that, like, it's a small town. There's no rules and regulations. I was wrong. And they definitely did. And I'm so happy I called them, because I was like, hey, Jim Bob, how's it going? What's the rules and regulations of short-term rentals? And he just had a whole list. And one of the items on the list was a 7-night minimum. And I'm like, dude, your township is small. You guys need the money. What are you doing? But that's part of it. So just make sure to call, and then also look at the small townships outside of the big areas, because most of the time, again, they're pretty good. Now, let's just mosey on to the HOA. HOAs are the tippy top of the pyramid. And remember that all of these rules and regulations are stacked on top of each other. So again, you have the state. Then you have the county rules that you have to go by. Then you have the township rules that you have to go by. And then you have to go by the HOA. Now, I think that you are a pretty ballsy person to get a short-term rental or make a short-term rental in HOA. And the reason is because they can shut you down literally within a week. And that is terrifying in my eyes. HOAs are homeowner associations, and pretty much they make all the rules and regulations for that neighborhood. And most of the time for these neighborhoods, they are I don't want to say the word pristine, but they are nicer neighborhoods, and they want to make sure that stays nice. So some of the rules is literally you can't park your boat in the driveway overnight. You can't have a snowmobile in the front yard for more than 24 hours. You need to get approval from the board if you want to change the color of your siding. It's that, those type of rules. Also, when it comes to rentals, they probably have a rule saying no rentals. But if they don't, then just so you know, any board meeting, they can literally just say raise your hand if you want to amend the HOA and say no rentals. And everyone's going to raise their hand because they don't want to be like that weird one that doesn't. And then they can shut you down. There are HOAs that do allow short-term rentals, and they actually advertise for this. Those are all fine and dandy, but if it's a really popular, pretty area and the HOA does say yes, and they are advertising for it, other people will see this, and that neighborhood would just have an influx of short-term rentals. So if you go this route, one, their HOA fee is probably going to be outrageous because I know that you're making boohoo bucks and they want to take some of that. Two, you better make sure that your property stands out from anyone else and that your property is the scroll stopper and you are the leader of the pack. Now, with that being said, that involves a lot of capital for great design and amenities. So just know that those are options. But in my personal opinion, I just stay away from any place that has an HOA just because I don't want someone to literally have control of my short-term rental saying, nope, you can't have one just because you had a bad guest one time. Like, that's just not my thing. Like, I want to be in control. I'm not saying I'm a control freak. Well, I'm a little bit of a control freak, and my husband can probably tell you I'm a control freak. But I like to have control of my short-term rentals. Now, that is the giant pyramid that literally scares so many investors. And well, honestly, this is like one of those stop signs that people will stop and then they just don't go. So now that you know what this giant rules and regulation pyramid is, hopefully you can take this, learn from it, and apply this to your own state. Again, I do have a mentorship program that is available for coaching if you are interested in this. We do go through a lot of the rules and regulations, how you find them, and then I also have a very spiffy spreadsheet that I give you that will help you kind of keep track of everything, and then also help you with analyzing, design, and all that good jazz. So if you're interested in that, make sure to message me on the Airbnb Roadmap podcast Instagram page, and then we can talk about the prices and all that good jazz further. But till then, I will see you next time. Thanks for joining me on the Airbnb Roadmap. If you're loving these episodes and want to keep the conversation going, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with someone who's ready to dive into the world of short-term rentals. Got a question or topic you would love to hear about? Reach out. This podcast is all about learning and growing together. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram, the Airbnb Roadmap Podcast, for more tips, tricks, and behind-the-scene insights. Until next time, here's to turning your short-term rental dreams into thriving realities. I'll see you back here soon.